All right, we are back. Peanut Gallery. Let's talk about death.
Yes, because there were two that happened this week. Terry Funk, of course, was very tragic, very influential individual within, especially in the hardcore scene, ECW and stuff, and very influential in Texas. The Funk family has a very long history of running shows out of Amarillo. But, of course, we also have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Bray Wyatt, who, despite people thinking that he's not an active member of the main roster, was still listed as an active member of the main roster.
You know what's really funny? He was actually sort of ready to return.
Yeah, he was getting ready to return.
And then all of a sudden, boom. I'm like, whoa.
Yep. 36 years old, and I think it was the first time in 16 years that an active member of the WWE roster passed away while they were still under a full-time contract.
I know it's not their fault, but AEW's been in existence for like 5 years, and they had 2, and it took 16 for WWE for another. Like, that's bonkers to me.
Well, again,
it's not their fault.
No.
It's not their fault, but it's just like, that's just kind of weird on how a lot of that worked.
But yeah, it was obviously, with that being said, though, a lot of wrestlers took it very hard because, unlike Terry Funk, a lot of these wrestlers had relationships with Bray Wyatt.
Now, okay, I did want to bring this up because you made an excellent point there. And I saw this online that people felt that Terry Funk's death did not get the same sort of recognition that Bray's did. And here's the thing. These two are drastically different, not only within age, but when they were in their prime.
Yeah.
Now, if you asked a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old who watched wrestling in Texas, I can guarantee you their effect of Terry's death was going to be a lot more than Bray's. But also, Terry Funk's heyday, when he won the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, this was like in the mid-'80s.
Right. Most of these wrestlers were not even born in the 80s.
Exactly. And
Bray Wyatt wasn't born until 87.
And this does not take away from Terry Funk's influence on wrestling.
It's just that these wrestlers have worked with Bray Wyatt more personally.
And we've seen Bray Wyatt carving out his legacy as it's going. So the fans are going to have a much more visceral reaction to Bray's death than Terry's death.
Right.
They're both equally as tragic, but once again, Terry Funk was retired 20 years.
Right.
10 years.
He's been, so people that are going to associate with Terry Funk are going to be people like what Mick Foley did for his tribute, because Mick Foley did work with Terry Funk.
And he worked with Bray Wyatt. Literally, he worked with both of them.
Right.
But Mick Foley had a closer relationship with Terry than he did with Bray.
Right. Unlike other people like Braun Strowman, for example. Braun Strowman never worked with Terry Funk, so he's not going to have that sort of reaction.
Eric Rowan never worked with Terry Funk.
Right. And most of this roster did not work with Terry Funk. Pretty much all this roster didn't work with Terry Funk.
I mean, like, I can really only name like a handful of them off the top of my head that probably worked with Terry Funk.
And Cody Rhodes did the tribute because his father worked with Terry Funk. And I think he spent a little bit of time.
One of the biggest rivalries that Terry Funk ever had in the 80s was with Dusty.
And that is why Cody was brought in to
do the Terry Funk tribute.
Exactly, because he was involved as the son of the person who was a rival of Terry Funk.
And Cody Rhodes was with Dusty a lot of the time that he was on the road.
Right.
Cody grew up around that.
Yeah.
So there was a big difference between those two.
Right. You're just not going to get the reaction from someone like, I don't know, Alexa Bliss or someone like Karrion Kross.
Right.
You're not going to get that you're not going to get reactions of Terry Funk from that because they never worked with Terry Funk.
Exactly.
They worked with Bray Wyatt.
They
Bray
probably
was a part of the roster.
Right. They probably looked up to Terry as an inspiration for some of their stuff because Terry Funk.
But they probably met like once or twice in their entire lives because Terry Funk retired 20 years ago.
Well, off and on.
Or right.
10. But Bray Wyatt was a friend. They had a deeper connection. And to myself, who started watching wrestling late 90s, early 2000s, all I knew about Terry Funk was through tapes and through what I've heard. And I did not watch ECW live because, number one, it was not syndicated where we lived. But also, I was a lot younger. I literally watched Bray Wyatt's debut as Husky frickin' Harris on the original NXT.
Right.
I had a more visceral reaction to Bray's than Terry's because I've literally...
You've watched Bray Wyatt's entire career.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't have to go into the past to watch what he did. I'm sitting here right now seeing him do the incredible stuff that he did.
And that's kind of why the death was as big. That's why Terry's honestly was a little overshadowed by Bray because of the proximity of career and the proximity of the number of people that remember him and that have worked with him over the years. That is why AEW did a freaking tribute, because a lot of the people that are in AEW worked with Bray Wyatt at some point.
Exactly. And, I'm sure that somebody like Eddie Kingston and John Moxley, Moxley might have a bigger reaction, but Eddie Kingston was probably more affected by Terry's.
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, because one of his influences was Terry.
Right.
He has a hardcore style.
Right.
And
but John Moxley, of course, working with Bray directly, is going to have a little more of a reaction to Bray's passing rather than to someone like Terry's. But a lot of the AEW roster, who are former WWE guys especially, are going to have fond memories of working with
Bray Wyatt. Not Terry Funk, because Terry Funk was already retired.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with, and also here's another thing that I've noticed on the IWC, because grief is very widespan. Mm-hmm. And there were people who were making sad tributes to Bray after his death, and they were legitimately crying.
Right.
That's normal. And you don't have to know that person personally. You know why? Because these two are public figures.
Right.
If I did not know Bray Wyatt from a hole in the wall, my reaction is going to be different. Mothership, as a perfect example, her reaction to Bray's death, albeit sad, was not the same as mine or Peanut Galleries or people who create content here on YouTube or on Twitch.
Right.
This is not going to be the same. But we see them, mm-hmm. and we connect with them on a different level because they are a public figure.
Right.
And it does suck,
mm-hmm.
but people do it differently. I didn't have to make a tribute cry video because I generally do my grief in solitude.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with doing either one of them. But when you put your reaction to a death on the internet, on an open forum, you have to accept that people will criticize you for maybe exploiting mm-hmm. or profiting off of his passing. Mm-hmm. But that's the consequence of doing that. Mm-hmm. Is that not a fair assessment on that? Because people are like, you should never attack anybody who made a grief video. No, that's ridiculous.
Right. But I don't have much more to say because I think that we've kind of, we all know Bray's legacy at this point.
Yeah, we don't have to. And with Terry's, you should see what he did. ECW would not be what it was without Terry. Terry was the big rub for ECW.
Right.
Just like what John Moxley was in that first episode of Double or Nothing. He was the big rub.
He was the rub.
Yeah, he was the guy.
Mm-hmm.
So Terry Funk was that inspiration for that very small company when they went there. Look at Kurt Angle when we went to TNA.
Right.
Literally the same thing. Hardcore style, the Japanese style of wrestling that Terry brought to America, and also his run within the NWA, winning the NWA World Champion, his tag team with his brother Dory Funk Jr., his dad's legacy, Dory Funk Sr.
And all of these, and this whole family, they have a huge connection to the Panhandle of Texas, where they ran their wrestling school.
Yeah,
and I think it still exists to this day.
Yep. If you go to like a southern state, like maybe Alabama, Texas, Terry Funk is going to be, that one's going to hurt them a little bit more.
Right.
Now with Bray, he has a legacy of his own, not just individually, but he has a dad.
He's part of the family, right?
Bo Dallas and all of that. And I think, and there were people who wanted Uncle Howdy to continue the story with Bray. And I think that would be a huge mistake. Let the memories stand for Bray. Mm-hmm. And WWE has learned from the past with Eddie Guerrero on what not to do. I think the tribute was perfect, and it should be placed at rest at this point.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure how many times I'm going to bring up Bray or Terry at this point, but I'm not going to go out of my way to do it anymore.
Right.
We're going to let the dead rest.
Yep.
And I think everybody should do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's just me, though.
All right. Well, anyways, when we come back, we got a bad match to watch.
Oh, yeah. Let's lighten up the mood here with a bad match.